denizens of the night. Welcome to another episode of the macabre, the terrifying. Tonight, we'll take a little field trip. You know, this story hits the ground running and holds you in a vice grip until the moment it ends. For me to reveal much at all about the circumstances behind the story would rob it of some punch. So, let me just say that this story is called Eyes on Your Littles and was written by Darren Todd. Enjoy.
Desperation alone had me attending the launch of the first self-sustaining boat from Ludden's docks alongside my student charges. So I was chaperoning when the sky opened up, though I shouldn't have been. I was supposed to hear about the launch from my son, Weems. He would have taken that chartered bus from his school to the airport, then ridden a plane for only his third time ever. He was meant to enjoy the buzz of energy from his classmates, independent but for a few parents and teachers. But no. Somewhere between the horror of losing Weems and that day at Ludden Harbor came the trip planning committee meeting about a week before the 3-day excursion. The face of the social studies teacher as I walked in can only be described as fearful. She had no reason to worry that I'd turned up to cause trouble, but she reflected apprehension all the same. If I had X-ray vision, or MRI vision, I guess, I would have seen the signals in her brain fire, misfire, crossfire, as she tried to conjure the right greeting. Welcome wouldn't have done. She must have known that. Good to see you would have been a transparent lie. She opted for a portmanteau of hello there and oh that came out ho there. Avast, I said back, deadpan. A month earlier, I'd have meant it to be funny. My reflex humor still lingered, now adding to the tension instead of easing it. I'm so sorry to hear about... Thank you, I said, and meant it. He liked your class. Oh, she drew the word out. Thanks for that. I'm here about the trip, I said. I paid Weems's way already. The refund window had passed by the time... A catch in my speech. What usually followed was a good half hour of sobbing, but I had prepared for this. I derailed my pending sorrow like King Kong swatting a train aside. I'm here to take his spot. See the boat launch? Her eyes widened. She looked down at the name tag stickers as if, among them, she might discover one for my name, like someone had known my intentions and wouldn't leave her to deal with me. No such luck. She said, the hum carrying long enough to sound musical. The note drew stares, mostly from other parents already seated and waiting for the meeting to begin. No, not other parents, just parents. I have to drop the other since it no longer applied. The parents, they pulled in sudden breaths, averted their eyes, sucked in their lips. I was the elephant man now. No less freakish, no less feared. Hated, even, if judging by those stares. Pitied, sure, but only from afar. Meant to stay away, lest they catch whatever I had suffered. Lest it infect them, and they, too, would get a visit from a police officer holding her hat, fingering the lining, cueing the right words to make what is generally regarded as the worst news possible hit a little softer. I don't know, the social studies teacher said. Miss Errol, that was her name. It sounded in my head like a mental tap on the shoulder, but in Weems's voice, playing from a tape recorder that would warp and fade with time. Warble and distort over the months and years until I could no longer hear him say it. By then, I would have no business being around her, of course, but that night, I meant to get my way. "It was a lot of money," I said, "and I can't get any of it back now, so I'm going to take his place on the trip. I'm here to get some details." I looked around, nodding, perhaps hoping to conjure some mirror neurons in the parents. "And find out what to prepare and all that." The principal appeared at her elbow, took it gently, and pulled her aside as if choreographed. He was a short guy and overdressed in a tweed jacket, wool vest, and pressed slacks. His cheeks stayed rosy no matter the season. I couldn't remember his name because Weems had never said it, never been pulled into his office for disciplining. He was a good kid. Fuck. He had been a good kid. Pluperfect. Past tense. His life would remain embedded in a past we were all leaving behind. Even as the air stilled and the parents froze in place, we were all still marching further from my son. "Mr. Tanner," he said, the tone soft, the volume low. "Let me tell you how sorry I am for your loss." "Thank you." He looked to the floor and tilted his head, his mouth an O. "That said, I'm not so sure you should be here." "I'm going to take Weems's place," I said again. "I couldn't get a refund, so—" "This is a school trip, Mr. Tanner," he said, cutting me off. "For children attending this school and for any parents who pay to come along." He turned to Miss Errol. "And for staff, either teaching or chaperoning. By law, we cannot have, others along who are not—" "I'll chaperone," I said. "Excuse me?" I nodded around the room again, finding zero accomplices among the parents. "I'll chaperone too. I've done so before, plenty of times." I dug out my wallet, hands shaking. "I have my fingerprint verification card and my background checks are all current." The principal took the card, but let the hand holding it drop, as if he meant to pocket any evidence of my credentials. He offered only a sigh, and then reached out and took me by the shoulder, guided me off to the side. Miss Errol was glad to address the short line of people behind me, all so silent I hadn't even noticed them there. He turned me so that his back was to those already seated, perhaps fearful his words would carry to them, or maybe to put himself in between them and me, protecting one from the other. Over his shoulder, around his short and shining head, I saw the parents stirring, leaning in to one another, less for support than to whisper, much like their children were chided for doing in the classroom. "Mr. Tanner," he said, cheeks still glowing but face dour. "I can't imagine what you're going through." He sucked in his lips, rubbed them against each other. "But this is not appropriate. You're putting me in a very odd position here, sir." I dipped my head down to his and leaned in. "Many years from now, long after the school is no longer a school, I'm willing to bet your great-grandkids will know it was a school, right? Too many things linger that would indicate its erstwhile purpose, right?" "Mr. Tanner, I don't know. That's my house right now, Principal." I searched again for a name, but just let the title hang in the air. "My mother's come up from Florida. She's gonna clean. I can't be there. Every atom in that fucking house testifies to who lived there. You understand? I need time away. Just a little while." Again, the tears threatened, but I shoved them back with something like a whimper, which caused the principal to shudder. "I have nowhere else to go." The short man's mouth changed shape, smile, frown, forming the start of words. Instead, he only squeezed my shoulder, "No!" came a shouted whisper from the parents. I looked to see one mother stand from her folding chair and pivot to face the others, backing up to put them all in view. An impossibly tall pink coffee mug grew out of one hand like a club. The other, fingers splayed, brandished long nails like weapons already shining with blood, traversing the air in front of her as if pulling aside a curtain. "I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry." She pointed my way. "He's not the only one who's lost a child. I miscarried before we got pregnant with the twins. You didn't see me hanging around the pediatric ward." "I'll take the twins," I whispered, meeting the principal's eyes. "I know damn well their mom's not going, and you know damn well no one wants to be responsible for her kids. Give them to me. I'll chaperone them." His silence gave me my answer. A week later, we were in the air, the plane writhing with an excitement only fifth graders possess. Old enough to value some space from their parents, but too young to be responsible for themselves. I kept a lazy eye on my charges, the three who weren't the twins. A kid who was friends with Weems, who'd spent a couple of nights at my house, in fact. One who Weems had known from the school bus, but not much else, and another I'd never seen. She mostly smiled and looked out the window. I didn't have to keep an eye on the twins, because Aranya's shrill voice, much like her mother's, carried through the cabin, suffusing the air like jet fuel. And her brother, Narayan, while mute as a stump, made pains to stay only inches from her, as if they still shared a womb. The mother's ex-husband had shown up to an assembly once, wearing the same simper his son wore in his sister's shadow. God knows how he'd managed the moxie to end that marriage. Maybe his wife had done the honors. "Everything good?" Miss Errol asked me from the aisle. I was tucked into the window seat, while the middle and aisle seats held parents, but she was looking right at me. "Peachy," I said. "Looking forward to it." The parents beside me smiled in agreement, then looked away. On the upside, I got both my armrests for the first time ever. For a while, I closed my eyes and tried to filter out Aranya's incessant tone. I'd pick apart the different voices, squeals of delight, whimper of mock or earnest pouting, teasing, cadging for pretzels, and try to winnow out Weems's voice from the others. Like, if I listened hard enough, wanted it badly enough, I could make this all a dream, a mid-flight nightmare from which I'd awaken to find Weems squirming next to me. He'd want something from the food cart, and I'd give it to him. Or he'd want my good headphones to watch a movie with his friends, and I'd let him do that too. The wheels hit, and I jerked awake, grabbing at the man in the middle seat, who gasped like he thought I'd decided to attack him. Instantly, I knew the reality I'd woken in, not fooled a single second into thinking that one of these kids was Weems, that maybe he was just out of my view, swapping Pokemon cards or staring at YouTube over the shoulder of a kid already armed with a smartphone. "Rough landing, huh?" the father asked. "Be glad you slept through the turbulence." I looked out my window. Not a cloud in the sky. "Should have heard the kids squealing over the bumps," he said. "Pilot said it was a little odd. Something about unexpected air pressure, skies moving. Never can really tell what they're saying, especially over the chatter." The wife laid a hand on his arm, chiding him, perhaps, for treating me as a fellow parent. He silenced and put his head down, like an android set to standby mode. He remained dormant while we taxied to the terminal, only moving once the kids across from us had filed out of their seats. I'd grown adequate at herding cats. Weems had been gregarious, like me at his age. I'd taken a dozen kids skating, another dozen to the movies, a handful for sleepovers and laser tag and pizza parties. So making satellites out of 3 of my flock proved easy. Getting the twins to comply, less so. I could only guess what their mother had said about me, but then again, perhaps it was all organic, just the way that Aranya comported herself, echoes of her mother manifesting in a tendency to wander off, eyes glued to her latest iPhone, pouted duck lips daring anyone to suggest that she fall in line. "Aranya, over here," I said for the 10th time. "It's Aranya," she said, grunting each syllable. "Try to get it right." "Our names are mammograms," Narayan said next to me. "Excuse me?" "That's anagrams, you idiot," Aranya barked. "And don't talk to him. He's basically a stranger. Remember what Mom said?" "You don't have to talk to me, but you do have to listen," I said as we left the bottleneck confines of the airport and queued for our shuttle to the Ludden Harbor. "Or what? You're not even supposed to be here." The other students had started to listen now. Aranya's entourage from other groups pulled closer by her conspicuous descent. Even the other chaperones looked to me and might as well have had clipboards perched on their stomachs, ready to judge my reaction, sharing in that little terror's distaste. I walked closer, over to her, her posture first suggesting capitulation, shoulders slumping, but then that chin jutted out, and her feet stuck to the concrete by sheer pig-headedness. The adults visually stiffened, so I stuffed my hands in my pockets before leaning down to her. "Or I'll tell the tour guide you're special," I whispered. "And I don't mean the sort of special you think you are. I mean the sort of special that requires lots of bathroom breaks because you've been known to wet yourself. I'm sure they'll accommodate." She looked horrified, jerking her head to her cronies, who had dipped their eyes, though their open mouths telegraphed comprehension. "That's not true," she said. "Doesn't matter, Aranya. I'll still say it, and they'll still believe me. So lose the attitude and keep your ears open. You read me?" She pressed her lips tightly together so that, despite the ruby-red lip gloss, the flesh lost color. "Whatever." I'd never seen Ludden's Harbor on a normal day, but I imagined it was pretty boring. Industrial machines waited to load freight at one end. Private boats hung suspended out of the water at the other. That day, though, the swarms of people waiting for the launch had turned it into an outdoor concert. The asphalt and lack of cover, as well as the pressed flesh of far too many visitors, made the 75-degree morning feel like 90. I immediately doffed my windbreaker and tied it around my middle, only then realizing the T-shirt I wore beneath. One that Weems had bought me last Christmas, a clever Star Wars meme he'd caught me laughing at, though most of his attempts to share internet content had fallen flat. I'd been unable to conjure even a courtesy laugh at the lowbrow comedy he would cackle over, and it saddened him. So I laughed overlong and hard at that single meme and had been rewarded with the overpriced tea for the holiday. It became my favorite shirt, so much so that I'd grabbed it automatically from my drawers before leaving my mother with the task of whitewashing the home of all things Weems, if such a thing were even possible. "Students, mind your bigs!" bellowed one of the teachers. "Chaperones, eyes on your littles!" A smattering of groans and laughter came in answer. "She's new," Narayan said up to me. "She talks like that because she's new, to our grade. She was teaching kindergarten last year." I huffed out a single note of laughter. "Guess it sounds a little kiddish to you now, huh?" He nodded. "But that's okay. She said that some of her kids from last year were really jealous because she gets to fly to England." "They thought it was London, not Ludden?" He nodded again. "But so did I. At first, I mean. I didn't tell anyone else that, but that's why it's okay." "Right on. That's a mature way of looking at it, bud." He pointed at my chest. I understand your shirt. I barely heard him over the rising din of the people, most of whom were also from schools, many with matching shirts or ball caps, all clicked off and shouting their own conversations, likely none of which were about the boat launch, but such was the nature of fifth graders. Thanks, buddy, I said. My son got it for me. I knew him, he said, an earnestness seeping off him. Thanks. He knew you too. And my sister, he said. Everyone knows her. Yeah, there's more to it than being known, I said. More to what? Life, school, work, childhood, all of it. You don't like her very much, he said. What do you think about the boat launch? I asked. Desensitization was one of their biggest challenges, he responded. That's what the website said. Desalinization means turning the salt water to fresh water. Yeah, takes a lot of energy. I imagine they'll get some of their drinking water from recycling their urine. Narayan's expression changed for the first time, wrinkling like a shrinky-dinks in a toaster oven. They're gonna drink their own pee? As if seeing the future, I knew that particular gym would make its way home, likely from brother to sister to mother. From there, likely to Principal What's-His-Name, and then it would wither and die, with the school having nothing more to hold over me. No admonishment or veiled threat to Weems's future because there was no future. Not for me as chaperone extraordinaire, as parent, as treasure trove of useless trivia, gross facts, dad jokes, and vain attempts to convey just how important it is to look both ways before crossing the street. What I thought was laughter came out as a whimper. My vision blurred with tears so that I felt rather than saw that small hand over my clenched fist. It's okay, Mr. Tanner, Narayan said. With my free hand, I wiped my eyes and was the first to see it, I think. Everyone else was looking at the boat, where a skeleton crew in matching jumpsuits was waving to the crowds, about to begin a 1-year journey with no sails, no gas, and no provisions. I'd suffered an ocular migraine once. Well, suffer is a bit of a stretch, since it was painless. Just a rainbow of geometric shapes that started as a pinpoint, then expanded into something like a trippy crescent moon. I figured it had to be a stroke. It just wasn't the sort of thing a normal person saw. You go to a movie, you can accept seeing a car explode, or a guy get shot who wasn't actually shot. But those shapes demanded a recalculation of reality from me, one that my optometrist was able to dispel as rare but harmless. When the tear in the sky began, I knew instantly that while it might have been rare, it was not harmless. My 5! I yelled. Get over here now! I don't know what series of synapses firing in my brain told me to look away. That looking was as dangerous as whatever horror was opening up from the other side. My charges turned, as did most of the kids around them. Thankfully, when my kids saw my face, they heeded my command, even Aranya. Look at me, I pleaded as they neared. Behind them, from my vantage kneeling on a knee, over their small shoulders, the tear opened up, revealing a jagged mountain of space so black that it stole hours of sunlight, sending the morning into late afternoon. At me, I repeated, when I could feel their curiosity demanding answers, could see their intent to turn and examine what had, all around us, caused a chorus of gasps. I put a finger to each of their cheeks in turn, like engaging touch lamps and drawing those faces to mine. Eyes on me, I ordered, softer now. Parenting had sharpened my instincts, so I tended to listen to that tiny voice in my head, trusting in whatever conclusions my subconscious had pieced together. It told me, don't look. Don't run. Just wait. It'll end one way or another before long. Weems was stubborn about bedtime. He never admitted as much, but he seemed to think that the moment he went to bed, all adults must be doing something amazing, something we never let the kids know about during daylight hours. Even when his mother took off and I was all alone, still he held on to that notion. So much that I'd sit and read the half hour after his bedtime, just so, in those few instances when he'd stayed awake and felt intrepid, he'd sneak to discover nothing more interesting than me holding a cracked book. I applied the equivalent now, staring over their shoulders into that terrible pitch, as if nothing more interesting than the sky towered over their backs. The tear reached all the way to the ground, or at least where there was ground. Part of it had extended over the channel, below the waterline, causing the water to cascade through that darkness as if over a cliff. But into what? A dark without features. The only thing breaking up the even blanket of pitch like an inverted V in the sky was the detritus pulled into that space. Papers, napkins, plastic bags, leaves, dust, even a trail of vape smoke from a hipster emitting a cloud of mist above the crowds. "What's the deal?" Aranya demanded. "Just look at me," I said. Perhaps a part of me already knew what was coming, just as I could have dictated what the officer told me, hat in hand, though Weems wasn't even late from his bus stop yet. Between two of my charges, closer to the water, a broad line of kids all clad in yellow t-shirts stared at the tear. Normally, anything more interesting than a cartwheel would have them pulling out their phones. Not this time. Their hands dropped to their sides, arms shaking. They arched them back and fanned out their fingers, mouths going impossibly wide, like some invisible thread had attached to their centers, their hearts, and was tugging each line until it drew taut. I couldn't see their eyes, but I'd have bet anything they were open wide, unblinking. "Mind your bigs," came the teacher's voice. "Eyes on your littles." God knows I was trying. "Right here, guys. Look at me." It seemed I'd avoided whatever force was tugging at the others. We'd get through this yet. "Whatever," Aranya huffed and spun around. I reached for her shoulder but missed, instead putting that hand on Narayan's shoulder, preventing him from shadowing his twin sister this once. She saw in full what I'd spotted in the short seconds before pulling my gaze to the grass at our feet and demanding my charges do the same. The dark tear, sure, but also slivers of light in that pitch. You could have mistaken them for stars, as many did once videos appeared online of tears all over the globe. But for those unfortunate thousands in view of the tear, they were no sooner stars than the black blanket was space. No, that darkness was a doorway, a path from another plane. From, not to. We didn't open it. For the thousands after who died from staring into that abyss, those lights weren't lights at all. They merely reflected our light, as a night vision scope reflects the eyes of a predator as something otherworldly, rendered 100 times more deadly for its foreignness. What manner of beings would open such a door only to stare at a place of relative peace, of light and hope, and children turned out in scores to celebrate a marvel of modernity? One's hungry for that space, of course. One's looking through the glass of a dessert case and slathering at what awaited them on the other side, what would soon serve to feed them, nourish them, and be rendered nothing more than tools to aid their greater agency. My tears dropped to the grass as my kids remained huddled. I whispered reassurances while my mind spun plans for what we would do if that terrible rip remained. Then, just as neatly as it had appeared, it sewed itself shut, creating silence as the water stopped churning, as the wind died down and the light bloomed once more. I moved my hands from their shoulders and risked a peek, finding only mid-morning sky. But then Aranya turned to face me. She'd wet herself after all, darkening the front of her pants in an act that would have mortified her only minutes before. Now, though, all affectation and the hissing and spitting had been doused. In their place was the 1,000-yard stare of a child soldier, of a refugee spent of all sorrow, of a creature who has seen its grisly fate, unassuaged by whatever days it has left against the certainty of its pending demise. The lucky witnesses that day got off with PTSD, some with dissociative disorder, where chunks of their lives going forward were surrendered to gaps as their minds tried to process what they'd seen. Many, perhaps most, shared the awful fate of what the news stories euphemistically called death by suicide. It didn't matter what country, what religion or culture, what age or skin color the witnesses. They had shared in scrying the horrors to come and lost their minds in consequence. As for me, I tell myself that I'm still alive because of seeing only that single second, that I might well have shared the other witnesses' fate had I looked overlong into that tear. But another truth hides behind my rational mind, cropping up when teetering on the edge of sleep like a hypnagogic reflex. It says that the darkness failed to seed in me because I had far darker fare already filling that space. It could not empty my well of hope because that awful realm could promise nothing so terrible as the vacant, silent, sterile home that awaited me. "She's coping," the twins' mother, May, told me a month after the incident. We were sitting in her living room. Her TV, like much of the world's sets, was tuned to 24/7 news about what they dubbed the day the Earth stood still, though the volume was down at least. Once they discovered that recorded video of the events failed to affect viewers the way that those unlucky enough to be there in person were affected, the shoddy clips played on loop. It had become a contemporary 9/11 or Kennedy assassination, a pivotal event creating flashbulb memories worldwide. Everyone shared their "I remember I was" stories. Everyone but those who were actually there, of course. They weren't saying much of anything. She handed me back my windbreaker, washed and folded. "I guess this is yours?" she said. "Yeah, I let Aranya use it to cover her. Thanks." "Thank you." I sipped at her proffered coffee, old and bitter but palatable for the sake of propriety. "I was surprised you asked me over," I said. "But I'm glad to hear that. She must be strong, 'cause a lot of people aren't coping." Weren't alive, more like. A terrible thought kept cropping up and pulling my attention, like those little plastic pests in a Chuck E. Cheese game of whack-a-mole, mocking and insistent until smacked down, only to pop back up again. If Weems had been among my charges, and he certainly would have been had I gone along, had he still been drawing breath when the world changed forever, would he have listened when I demanded they look away? I could see myself there with him, all of us huddled over like a sports team making a plan. Go defense! He would have seen my earnestness, my desperation, my fear, my unending love for him, and a desire to protect above all else. And he would have, in all likelihood, turned and beheld that awful tableau, if only to assert himself. Such were the innate drawbacks of parenting a headstrong child. Alas, no longer my concern. In some capacity, no longer May's. May wagged her head side to side. I say she's coping, but most days that's about the best I can say. She stared out her window, where the sky was a harmless blue. I know I've been unkind to you, Mr. Tanner. Bryce, I said. Truth is, Bryce, if you hadn't saved Narayan, I don't know his sister would have done much of anything, gotten any better. She was like a zombie when y'all came back, you know? Once they let the planes fly again. 3 days of hell waiting on them, honestly. I nodded. Those 3 days had found me still playing chaperone to my charges, because every other kid, save for 2 that had gone to the bathroom, was more akin to an empty vessel than a child. Even when catatonia eased to something like lethargy over several hours and their faculties of speech returned, the parents and teachers might as well have been among the children, as useless as they were in taking charge. As the only sane adult remaining, it was a minor miracle to have gotten everyone home at all. He's a good kid, I told her. Loves his sister, and I'm sure that's made all the difference. She jerked her head around like I'd said something off color, but those wide eyes suggested dread, not anger. What was it, Mr. Tanner? What on earth did she see? Not on earth, I said without thinking. I forced down the last of my coffee, leaving a bog of dregs swirling in the cup. Not yet.
Whoa! What an image! The sky split to reveal a vista of emptiness that drives onlookers to the brink. Horrifying. My mind jumped to A.G. Hilton's story, Swarm. They're not in the same universe, but that doesn't mean they can't work off each other. This was truly an exceptional story to me. If you agree, please consider supporting Darren by picking up a copy of his upcoming release, Cul de Sacrifice. Better yet, you can find him at an upcoming horror con in Atlanta, Days of the Dead. Let me know in the comments if you're planning to go. Ha, and don't forget to tell him the Midnight Host sent you. Whatever you do, keep an eye on your big and don't fall asleep.